So it's hard not to talk about the heat when last week we talked about how we doomed up the whole program by talking like politics at the beginning. But then it's like hard not to talk about the heat. And then like my neighbor town's on fire again.
Yeah.
When I moved here, my north two neighbor towns burned down, but now my south town neighbor is about to burn down and the fire's like 30 miles away from us. And like it's smoky here. And I know I look pleasant, of course, but
You
really
always look
I'm
pleasant.
hot and sweaty and miserable and I smell like death warmed over.
Yeah, same. Except not for the smoke part. But you know what? I mean, it really shouldn't be the same up here because this is the Pacific Northwest, well known across the world for being cool and dry, and we are like at the same latitude as Britain, basically. So we're basically in Canada.
But
It
they're
should
having
not be
their
this hot
hottest
up
days
here.
on record in England right now.
Yeah. And last week it was in the 90s here, and in England, I think it's been about that much. It's although actually I want to say this summer as a whole, there have been a bunch of like 100-degree days in England,
Oh yeah,
which
they're
is
hot. Yep.
insane. They're none of none of their stuff is set up for that. But
Right.
I
Their
was
PC
thinking,
fog is now like stank. It's now like British. It's stank from the tube from the
yeah,
subway coming up.
it's just aerosolized sweat.
Right. Yeah.
But
Sorry.
I was thinking the other day because I keep saying, when talking about Seattle or about Britain or Canada or whoever, that like, their infrastructure is not set up for it. They don't have air conditioning. They're not prepared for heat waves. But the thing is, why aren't they at this point? Like, why aren't we here in Seattle prepared for heat waves? Because
Well,
we've had a massive heat wave that's killed people every single summer for like the last 10 years. So what are we doing? Why doesn't everywhere have air conditioning yet?
well, for the same reason that everywhere isn't have buildings to resist an earthquake. Nobody made them do it.
Yeah, well,
I
that's
mean,
the answer,
ultimately,
isn't
that's why
it?
that's why we live in houses. At least when we lived in California, that weren't going to come down in an earthquake, or less likely to.
Right.
It's because they were made to do it. They didn't want to spend the extra money out of the goodness of their hearts to give you air conditioning. You have to demand it or pay more.
Right. Yeah. Well, I
It's
think,
the American way, Kara.
well, it's not just the American way, it's also the British way, apparently.
Oh yeah, but
Because,
they're doing things our way. You have to admit.
no, they
They
are.
got
We
the
are,
idea from us. We started this.
we are, the dysfunctional child of a equally dysfunctional parent. It's true.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, there's something very incestuous about our governments.
yeah, well, really, all the little like the white colonial nations that Britain spawned have. But I like to think though that we're sort of the prodigal child of Britain. I think we're the ones that like takes after the parent the most and maybe even like surpasses them. And all the others, Britain looks at Canada or Australia and it's like you're living in my shadow.
Right,
You
right. We
you
joined the
never became
military
your
and
own.
Canada got like a liberal arts degree.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah, no,
So
totally get you. Um,
yeah.
I will say that all this heat and flooding and stuff, it makes me think of two things. It makes me think one terrible thing about humanity, and that is that, for these past couple of years that I've seen fires go on in on the West Coast in California specifically, you get a lot of rhetoric of like people saying like, oh, they're burning because they're Dems or they're doing this, that, and the other thing because they're against God. They're being smited from this earth. Now, I'm not
Right.
I'm not saying that everybody's saying this. Of course, we have a terrible habit of like taking what the internet says and then saying that that's what they say, and then having this.
Right. The biggest fringe crazies now represent,
Right, right,
the
and
entire
I know that's
wing
the
of
case, but
people. But yeah.
now I'm wondering if there's fringe crazies in California who are going like, oh, those Kentuckians are being smited by science because of their waterness or something. If there's a bunch of hateful stuff out there.
How could that thing have gotten aboard?